Alright, this video, if I am in any way competent, should come out on New Year's Eve, and New Year's is a wonderful time to be retrospective. As someone dipping my toes into custom magic as a community and as a space, I thought we could have a look at the 20 most popular submissions in r/custom magic from the past year. The subreddit for custom magic is the internet's premier venue for fan card game creation display, and if you're seriously into custom magic design, and there are people out there who are seriously into it, then you might have just bristled, but don't worry. I'm well aware, and you should be too, viewer, that this isn't necessarily the best that the community has to offer. We're looking at essentially the most popular niche in-jokes in a niche subsection of a Magic the Gathering fandom, which is the kind of thing that's so niche that perhaps a full dozen of my subscribers will be interested in viewing it if I'm lucky. But if that sounds good to you, then let's talk format. Instead of going down the list from 20 to 1, I've broken this video into 4 short sections. We have non-functional joke cards that exist just to make us smile, functional joke cards that are both funny and reasonable game pieces, bright ideas that have won the public's hearts through sheer good design alone, and finally, the weirdest category, cards that are public statements, cards that serve as a way for the community to vent its collective frustrations. So, let's get started, and we'll have a look first at the non-functional, silver-bordered kind of jokes. So, Magic has a history of silver-bordered cards that are meant to be fun to read and not necessarily too serious. The 19th card of 2020, Essential Oils, is a good example of this. At first blush, it seems like an unassuming, if extraordinarily weak card, until you realize that it has no rules text. This text? It's in italics. It's flavor text. Italic text in Magic the Gathering has no rules meaning. This card tricks you into thinking it could do something, but instead it does literally nothing. The card could see no actual play anywhere. It's not meant to be fun to play, it's not meant to be an interesting game piece, it's meant to be a funny joke at the expense of snake oil salesmen. Notably, it has a black border, but a card that does literally nothing like this would never be seriously printed. Anyhow, the next card is scry 2, then draw 2 cards. The 10th card of 2020. Well, the joke here is that it's confusingly named scry 2, then draw 2 cards. It's an efficient draw spell, and the title, flavor text, and rules text have all been displaced and swapped around. Technically, this card would do absolutely nothing if it was printed the way it is, but that's just the price of poor paperwork, I suppose. The 8th card of all time is another Essential Oils joke. Significantly more popular than the previous namesake, this design seemed to grab people a little more. The joke here doesn't really require knowing which parts of a card are rules text or which part is flavor text. Anyone can tell that a +0/+0 counter isn't going to do any creature much good. The pedant in me wants to make it clear that these counters, whilst doing almost nothing, do actually exist. They prevent Heartless Act from destroying the creature, they give fuel that Spark Diviner can use to draw cards. But those edge cases aside, this is another card poking fun at alternative medicine. The 7th card of all time, Time, is delightful. I keep saying all time. The 7th card of the year, Time, is delightful. A slightly efficient flyer, this card plays on the expression time flies while you're having fun, and is a really, really clean silver-bordered card. It's funny to read and fine to play with, just a wonderful piece of jovial design, all in all. The 6th is Thesaurus Rex. The joke here, of course, is that there's a sesquipedalian loquaciousness involved in this card's rules text. Instead of the regular words that one would be used to appearing on a Magic the Gathering card, alternatives are used instead, and not always fitting ones that seem plucked directly from a thesaurus. Ho ho, indeed. And then we have, well, the slightly peculiar format that I've decided to do this video in comes to bite me, as we take an early look at Custom Magic's most upvoted card for the entire damn year, Brag. This is a card that would not see print, it does almost nothing, I mean it does shuffle your library. I feel like this is a joke that I don't get. I mean, I do understand that it's a fun translation of what bragging is into cardboard form, but whoa, I've written like a couple of 100 words on why I don't get the joke of this card exactly, or why I don't get why it's so popular. Why did I write so much? It's terrible for the flow of the video. I can't use any of the functional jokes. This is the kind of category that I personally live for. I think that making a functional piece of rules text that also makes you smile is just a worthwhile way to spend an afternoon. So look at Again and Again, the 20th card from the past year, the 20th card from 2020. Magic has a lot of cards like this, by which I mean cards that are made up of smaller cards. It does them in a few ways. These cards have a naming convention where you put the word "and" in between the names, such as Breaking and Entering. Again and Again is just a simple way to repeat the other spells you cast, and if you have the extra mana lying around, you don't have to repeat it just once, you don't just get it again, you get it again, and again. Lovely. The 17th card from the past year is Octopus Knight. Octopus Knight is just another lovely little guy. He's funny. When you get him to hold 8 pieces of equipment, you win the game for fully outfitting your little cephalopod. But more than that, it's not just fun to think about, it would actually be fun to do. Try to imagine what a deck sincerely built around this guy would look like. It's an interesting idea. Do you want to legitimately have worthwhile equipment in the deck so that even without the alternate win condition, you can still be somewhat effective? Or are you committing wholeheartedly, running only the cheapest nonsense so that the octopus can win you the game by holding 2 spoons and a pair of boots? This is one of those designs that's funny on the face of it and also just a little bit of an interesting thought exercise, so I really like Octopus Knight. The 14th card of all time, Speeding Ticket, is one I like a little bit less. I debated as to whether this card should even be in the functional jokes category. In reality, a card like this would never see print, it's just much too narrow. I mean, yeah, it's funny, creatures that are hasty get speeding tickets, but does it function? I mean, really? I mean, not really, but hey, it works in the rules, and it kind of is funny, so I guess it's here. But yeah, that's Speeding Ticket. The 9th card of all time is Paranoid Forester. And so in a Magic Fantasy land, woodsmen probably do have to be careful not to be murdered by angry trees. This card does an interesting double job to me. I mean, yeah, it's funny, he does damage to lands for no reason, doesn't do much, but also, it's not for no reason. He probably does this from experience, and it's a perspective I never would have thought of before, that of a lumberjack in a fantasy world. And that perspective is delivered to me in this weird Magic the Gathering card joke. Was this video a mistake? Is explaining other people's jokes for 15 minutes a valuable use of my or your time? Why is it that we live in an economic system where people like Yorick here have to risk their lives to chop wood that other men who were born into wealth will then own and make a profit off of? Furthermore, for roses and violets. Create a plant token that's red, create a plant token that's blue. Until end of turn, plants you control get +3/+2. Lovely. 2. Zombie Army Goes. This was the second most upvoted card from the past year. So it's a mass, hasty way to turn zombies in your graveyard into an attacking force, and it seems pretty innocuous at first, unless you know how we Magic players have grown to talk about the mana costs on the cards we play. Each symbol gets spelled out with a letter explicitly. White is W, blue is U, because black gets to be B, the privilege of alphabetical supremacy. Red is R, and green is G. So this card, if you read the title and then the mana cost, is Zombie Army Goes Brrr. I really didn't know when I set out to make this video how much it was going to be explaining jokes. I really might have reconsidered. Alright, so this next, much smaller category is called Bright Ideas. This is just cards that were actually interesting enough to think about. People like them enough as cards, no jokes required. So the 16th card of all time is Judgment for All. And this is a little bit more cerebral. I mean, Judgment for All is a weird card to wrap your head around. Depending on the mana you use to cast it, Judgment for All can be a very flexible little card. You can make it immune to being countered, or you can have it hit planeswalkers, or artifacts, or enchantments. 6 mana to destroy all creatures isn't a very efficient cost to spend on getting this effect, but the flexibility to potentially avoid hitting your own important permanents, and laser focusing on the type of permanents your opponents are using, is really fun to think about, and would be interesting to brew around too. Then, the 15th card of all time was actually 2 cards, presented as one. It's of many heads, and it of many tails. So these guys work as little commander cards. You can run them both as the heads of a commander deck, and when they're both on the battlefield, any card you have that makes you flip a coin, you're always going to get some benefit out of it. This design is a little subtle, actually, in comparison to a lot of what we've seen before. These cards wouldn't be very powerful, and they wouldn't be very splashy, but they are a fun way to remove the sting of playing a weird coin flip deck only to have all your coins come up the wrong way. When these guys are on the battlefield, there is no wrong way. And they've got excellent names, like pretty evocative flavor. I can see why they are where they are. Out of all the cards that exist in this top 20, I think It's of Many Heads and Tails is just the most subtle and low-key out of all of them. The next card isn't really in any category, he's kind of just by himself. He's got weird art, which might be why he's so popular, but as a card he's just kind of fine. It's just totally functional. It makes a creature attack and draws you a card. I mean, what more do you need? There's a lot of ways you could get maybe a 2-for-1 out of this if you're clever, but that's enough work you'd have to put in. That's not a huge risk, so it's just quite balanced. I mean, it's not really a bright idea. Like, no one's looking at this card and thinking, ooh, interesting implications. It's just a totally fine card that they'll probably print sometime. I mean, it didn't really fit anywhere else, so here it is. But by far the most interesting of these 20 cards to me are the statement cards. These 5 cards aren't really cards at all, and they're not quite jokes either. They're essentially op-eds or editorials in cardboard form. If we look at Master Plan, a card that has you boast and bluster before doing some relatively minor army raising and planeswalker killing, The card is a satirization of the story of War of the Spark, supposedly the culmination of, in real life, years of storytelling and in universe centuries of planning. The grand climax of Magic's modern story resulted in Nicol Bolas raising a pretty ineffectual army and successfully killing one named Planeswalker. And that guy was willing and eager to work for him, so it wasn't really a huge victory. War of the Spark actually delineated the time that I stopped caring about Magic's story. I don't really have any faith anymore that the details that are being set up are going to be paid off in any satisfactory way. I can't. I've been hurt before. And the master plan knows my pain and has me laugh about it. Then we have two very similar cards, 12th and 3rd. They're essentially the same design. There was some mild controversy a while ago about Jeweled Lotus being a mythic in Commander Legends. It was seen as a rather cynical, planned maneuver to get people to buy packs for the thrill of explosive opening turns, and it created a lot of negative discourse. A lot of people are unhappy at how the card Jeweled Lotus can randomly end games by getting one player extremely ahead, and a lot of other people thought the fact that it didn't do this very consistently meant that no one had any cause to complain about the injection of even more extreme variants into the game. These cards seem to poke fun at the design by giving players a ton of mana for free, but only if they spend it on Colossal Dreadmaw, a relatively underpowered card that the community has for some reason decided to adopt as its favorite pet. That reason honestly escapes me a little. Just, you know, the way internet communities can get. Colossal Dreadmaw is our mascot, and so when you're trying to showcase how weird and odd Jeweled Lotus's design is, this is the immediate way that jumps to mind. So I mean, the cards aren't serious attempts at card design, they're just trying to show, by analogy, the problem that people had with Jeweled Lotus. They're kind of like little pieces of propaganda, and I find them kind of interesting as that. Number 11, White Ramp. Magic was designed as a 1 versus 1 game, but is being played more and more each day as a multiplayer format of EDH or Commander, and in this format, White suffers a lot. Its strengths are minimized and its weaknesses exacerbated by the shifting from 1v1 to multiplayer. Wizards have struggled to design decent ways of getting White ahead on mana, colloquially being referred to as ramp, and of the past few cards they've made to try and give White ramp have generally been pretty underpowered. The card almost has an acerbic quality to it here. Try again, Mr. Verhey, it seems to say, spitting as it does so. A literal ramp will be better than the mana acceleration you've given me. I wouldn't take a phone call from that hawk. Whether White should have access to better mana acceleration is a topic that floats around from time to time. Exactly what this card is saying about that is a little unclear, but it's saying something, and I think it's just vague enough that people on either side of the argument were happy to give it an upvote because they thought it was speaking to them. And that's probably how this innocuous little guy got to the 11th most popular card in the past year. The 5th most popular submission on r/custom magic is probably the most interesting. So speaking of statements about the colors and their relative power levels, just have a look at the cycle of cards. Magic Color Pie has been a central design tenet for the duration of the game, but there has always been fun thought experiments as to allowing colors to combo their own effects to achieve outcomes that they are not supposed to be able to have. So each of these cards, to some extent, does something that the color is allowed to do, but usually in such a way as to do something that feels very wrong. What's more, each is a color-shifted version of another iconic card in another color, name dropped in the title of each of these cards. So this cycle is part joke and part argument. It shows very elegantly, I think, why Mark Rosewater is so afraid to do things like to give White card draw, or why he calls Beast Within and Chaos Warp mistakes. You can cook up a card with entirely white ingredients and find that it doesn't fit at the end in White's sliver of the color pie. You can do this with every color. It's not just flavor, and it's not just mechanical process, but it's also the end result of the cards that is restricted by the color pie. And this cycle perhaps is the most elegant argument possible in favor of that point. If you take away that end restriction, then there isn't really a color pie, because there's enough room inside each color's wheelhouse to get to places it's not supposed to be. And yeah, there we have it. 2020 has been a wild year for all of us, but in r/custom magic, it's been a year mostly of jokes, and of a couple of almost political statements, with a little bit of interesting card design thrown in as spice. I hope you found this run-through interesting or illuminating. I wonder if 2021's selection is going to be quite so humor-focused. It might just be the year that's in it that has everyone eager to blow off a little steam by making some joke cards. Thank you to the lovely patrons who help to fund these videos of mine. I appreciate it a lot, you guys. And if you want to help us out for some reason, if you thought, how much time is it now? Like 15 minutes of me explaining jokes. Wasn't it? If that's something you for some reason want more of, the link to the Patreon is in the description. Yeah, alright. Stay home, guys. See ya.